Angle relationships lesson 3. We have 4 remaining angle pairs to look at. Corresponding angles, alternate interior angles, alternate exterior angles, and complementary angles. Complementary angles is kind of a special angle. We're going to solve pair algebraic expressions and equations. And we're going to have a final test. As a quick review, lessons 1 and 2, here are the key points. If you really need to spend more time on them, just pause this audio and just review them. You can see that there are vertical angles, linear pairs, supplementary angles, and right angles. The first of the new ones is corresponding angles. You can see on the right side, they're on the same side of the transversal in the same location. You can see in the yellow box, we're going to deal with angles on that side of the transversal. And we're going to look at the same location on both of those. And so you can see angle A and angle B are both above their respective parallel lines. They're equal to each other by definition. Angles E and F are below their respective parallel lines on the same side of the transversal. Their corresponding angles are equal to each other. Similarly, if we look at pairs of angles that are on the left side of the transversal as indicated by the yellow box, angles G and H are equal, and similar to something we did before, they're vertical angles, and so by definition they're equal to each other. And the same with C and D. Now there's a tool that you can use to determine if the angles are corresponding. You can draw an F forwards, backwards, upside down, and for example. And therefore, in this case, you can see that it was drawn, and at the same locations, the E and the F and the B and the A's, just as a tool you can use. You can see if you go reverse, the same kind of a tool you can use to determine if they're corresponding angles. Now let's look at a sample problem with corresponding angles. We're going to solve for x and find what the angle measures are of both of these angles. Okay, so what do we know? We're going to draw the letter F forwards and backwards in order to determine if these are corresponding angles. They are. We set up the equation. We know then that 8x plus 6 equals minus 2 plus 9x, and we solve it. You see the common errors. We don't make those, of course. We move forward and we find that x is equal to 8. We put, oops, I put 4 there. Well, but it's 8. We put 8 in the equation itself in order to determine what the measure of each of the angles is, and the angles sum to, at least the angles equal 70 degrees each. Let's look at alternate interior angles, and the yellow box indicates the angles that we're going to be concerned with. And we can look at alternate interior angles, meaning on opposite sides of the transversal. You can see A, B here are on opposite sides. By definition, they're equal to each other. And similarly, C and D are on opposite sides inside of the parallel lines. They are equal to each other. And since they're along, these two are along a straight line, they are a linear pair, therefore their sums equal to 180 degrees. And A and D are supplementary angles as well. Okay. Let's look at alternate exterior angles. And the boxes here indicate that we're going to be concerned with angles that are outside of the parallel lines, and they're on alternate sides or opposite sides of the transversal. By definition, alternate exterior angles are equal. And so we just continue similarly as before. The final one is complementary angles. This one is where we have the box. And anytime we see the box, we know that that angle is 90 degrees. Therefore, if there's any kind of transversal cutting through those angles, the sum equals to 90 degrees. Okay. So we know that A and C are complementary angles. Here's a sample problem. Angle D measures 43.5 degrees. What are the angle measures of E, C, and A? Okay, what do we know? Okay, well, by the boxes we know that we have some angles that are outside of the transversal line, and if we disregard line EF, we can see that angles C and D are alternate exterior angles, and by definition they're equal to each other. So since we know that angle D measures 43.5 degrees, we know that C has to equal to the same. What's the second thing that we know? Well, we know that A and C are complementary, and since we know what C is, then we just subtract that from 90 degrees, and so we know that A is 46.5 degrees. What did we know? 3. The third thing we know. Well, by definition, if two parallel lines are crossed by a transversal that is perpendicular, then every angle that's related to those are equal to each other, meaning they're equal to 90 degrees. So we know that E is equal to 90 degrees. Congratulations, you've completed lesson 3 of angle relationships. The next 2 presentation sheets, they're going to be 7 questions, and they're going to be test taking hints, and we have a new memory enhancer tool that will help set up equations so that you can determine by sight very quickly whether the angles equal each other or sum to 180 degrees. Okay, here's some test taking hints on the right side. Go through those. On the left side, in the yellow box, each of the questions has 3 things to look for. One is state the angle relationship, solve for x, and determine the measure of both angles. Here's our new memory enhancer tool that will help us in determining whether we should set up the equations as being equal to each other or summing to 180 degrees. I love this tool. If you take lines and you go across them, let's look at 2 through 7, and you split the lines, at least the angles, and just draw a line through them as we've done here. If those lines, if you look at these lines, if they are parallel to each other, then the angles are equal to each other. If they are not, or if they cross, then they sum to 180 degrees. Isn't that great? I mean, a very simple tool. And you can see then by this example, 2, 3, 4, 6 are parallel, so their angles are equal to each other. So we set up the equations such that one equals the other. 5 and 7 angle pairs sum to 180, so we add them and set that up, those equations up as equal to 180. And since 1 has that box in it, automatically we know that all the angles in 1 are 90 degrees. So the answer sheet explains what the relationship is. The critical part is understanding the equations and how to set them up. And they've all been solved, and all the results as far as what the angle measures are displayed. So spend some time on that, go over it, but now we're done. Congratulations, you've completed angle relationships.